Okay, let's dive right into this explainer by thrusting you immediately into a grand, candlelit royal feast. Imagine the fire is just roaring in this massive stone hall, and all these powerful nobles are sipping from ruby-encrusted goblets. And there you are, constantly scanning their faces, looking for a tell, a nervous twitch, a suspicious glance, because you are absolutely not the guest of honor tonight. Actually, you are the very first person to eat.
Would you die for the king's dinner? I mean, as you stand there holding a silver goblet while literally every single person in the room watches you in dead silence, you've just realized the visceral, terrifying stakes of your new job. You are a royal food taster. If that beautiful, steaming stew you're about to eat is laced with poison, well, congratulations, you've just saved the entire kingdom simply by dying.
Your reality is terrifyingly simple. You have no armor, no sword, just a spoon. You aren't some highly trained medical expert armed with vials of secret antidotes. Surrounded by armed palace guards whose only job is to ensure you actually swallow the food, you are literally a human warning label. You're a biological shield, standing squarely between the monarch and certain death, expected to just take the first bite.
So how exactly did you end up in this nightmare scenario? Well, this terrifying role traces all the way back to ancient Rome, where it was known as the praegustator. That comes from the Latin pre, meaning before, and gustare, meaning to taste. Slaves and freedmen were employed to basically act as empirical screens for rapid onset toxins. A famous example is Emperor Claudius. He had a taster named Helotus, who famously, and let's be honest, very suspiciously, somehow survived the exact meal of poisoned mushrooms that killed the emperor back in 54 CE.
Now, look at how this lineage of paranoia just builds and builds over millennia. It starts all the way back in the 23rd century BC with Sargon of Akkad's cupbearers. Then we see Alexander the Great adopting the Persian adiatros role around 330 BCE to protect himself amid some really intense military camp rivalries. Claudius formalized it in 54 CE, as we mentioned, and then the practice just spirals completely out of control into the peak absurdity and deadly palace intrigue of 15th century Renaissance Europe.
What's really wild here is the contrast. See, if you were an ancient cupbearer, like Nehemiah from biblical texts, you were actually a highly respected, trusted, and lucrative high-ranking officer. It was a good gig. But fast forward to your life as a Renaissance food taster? Yeah, it's a completely different story. You are an expendable, coerced human shield. Nobody is thanking you for your service. They are literally just staring at you, waiting to see if you drop dead on the floor.
Which brings us to part 1 of our explainer, the Taster's Toolkit and Surviving the Feast. Let's look at how you actually get through a meal.
Okay, so your primary tool isn't a chemistry set, it's entirely your own sensory evaluation. You are frantically searching for bitter, micromolar concentrations of plant-derived poisons. You might catch cyanide from a bitter almond odor, though, ironically, 20 to 40% of people lack the gene to even smell it. You might spot arsenic or hemlock when they trigger fast-acting convulsions or vomiting within minutes. But stealthy, delayed toxins like thallium, they render your tasting completely 100% useless, because by the time your hair starts falling out days later, the king has already eaten the food. To mitigate these practically impossible risks, you develop some desperate tricks. You're doing things like fake swallowing into a cloth, taking the absolutely smallest bites humanly possible, or quietly paying off a chef for a warning. You're constantly trying to read the nervous eyes of the kitchen staff. But make no mistake here, one cook with a grudge, or just a single flinch during a meal, could cause a panic that results in your immediate execution. You couldn't even grimace at a salty bowl of soup without risking a royal guard putting a sword to your neck.
All right, moving into part 2, a lose-lose game, and the massive psychological toll this takes on a person.
A banquet in Florence is less a feast than a funeral rehearsal. I mean, that quote perfectly captures the sheer, suffocating paranoia of courts in Italy and France during the Renaissance. Poisoning was the clean, fashionable, and highly untraceable strategy for assassination. You didn't need to raise a whole army, you just needed a tiny vial of powdered death. Like the fabled cantarella, the Borgia family famously slipped into wine goblets right in the middle of a polite conversation.
And here is the ultimate, incredibly cruel irony of your job. If you died, the king survived. But if you lived, you were the threat. Think about it for a second. If you taste the food, you survive. The king eats it, and then the king falls ill the next morning. Well, who do they blame? They immediately assume you missed the poison, or maybe you built up an immunity, or worse, that you orchestrated the entire plot yourself. The longer you successfully survived your job, the more deeply suspicious the court became of you. Your loyalty offered zero protection.
Paranoia reached such maddening fever-pitch levels that some courts literally assigned 4 tasters per meal. You'd have one for meats, one for sweets, one for wine, and a backup just in case the first 3 were secretly bribed by rival nobles. Monarchs like Henry VIII allegedly kept dozens of tasters on hand, and it got so crazy he was forcing them to even taste each other's food before it ever reached his plate. This hypervigilance was a crushing daily trauma. It regularly left surviving tasters with phantom pains and literal nightmares of choking.
So let's transition to part 3, modern echoes. Because if you thought this brutal system died out in the Middle Ages, well, the paranoia persists.
Historical records show that 20th and 21st century leaders consistently maintained dedicated tasters as part of their security protocols. Adolf Hitler employed Margot Volk and 14 other young women to test his meals, forcing them to wait 45 minutes in tears just to see if symptoms developed. Joseph Stalin used Alexander Ignatishvili to counter perceived threats, even running toxin trials on rabbits. Saddam Hussein relied on Kamel Hanagageo, who, incredibly, was actually murdered at a reception by Hussein's own son. And today, Russian President Vladimir Putin utilizes specialists to test for nerve agents. The names and the centuries change, but the grim protocol, it remains exactly the same.
And this biological filter concept, it even scales up to massive international events. During the 2008 Beijing Olympics, organizers actually used white mice to empirically test athlete food like milk, salads, and rice. The goal was to intercept rapid-acting threats or contaminants before they could cause widespread harm. Whether it's a human or an animal, the fundamental role of the biological filter survives to this day.
But right now, let's bring you back to that candlelit medieval table. You've just swallowed the plum sauce duck. The grand hall goes completely, deafeningly silent. Hundreds of eyes are locked onto you. 10 agonizing seconds pass. Are your pupils dilating? Is your stomach clenching? You can't show fear. You have to smile for the nobles, even as your own stomach just completely churns.
As you stand there under the intense, suspicious gaze of the court, just waiting for your knees to give out or your skin to go cold, you look over at the king. He is waiting. And you are left to wonder, is your survival tonight simply an illusion? Or is it just a brief delay before the fatal strike?